Mr. Nick, how's it going?
Mr. Nick, I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah. So we work together.
We do.
Yeah. So when I got hired at Independent Helicopters, there's two locations. So there's our Stewart location and our Saratoga location. So up at the Saratoga location, it's basically the three of us.
Yep,
It's me, you, and our boss.
correct. And for the longest time, it was almost just
Keep that
me.
microphone like right by your mouth.
Yeah, it was only me for the longest time.
Yeah. So you had like the place to yourself. So let me ask you this. What was your journey into helicopters? So what was your life before and how did you get into it?
My journey into helicopters was an interesting one. So way back in the day, I used to live in Las Vegas, and back then I was doing some things like instructing in cage fighting.
Wait, so we got cage fighting. How did you get into cage fighting?
I there was a gym down the street, and I was looking for something new to do, trying to get in better shape, and I just wandered in, assumed I would hate it, spent like an hour getting the crap beat out of me, and decided it was good for me, so I stuck around.
And what is cage fighting like?
Well, cage fighting is like a lot of things. I mean, it's the reason why I'm missing a tooth right now, but it's not one in front, so nobody can see. It's just really hard. It's great exercise. It's the most fun I've ever had doing anything like that. Um, I used to do that depending on the day, 6, 7 days a week, 2 to 4 hours a day.
Damn.
And I just go like run a marathon because didn't train. Just I feel like running 26 miles today. I can't do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is where I met Shannon,
Okay.
my lovely fiance, and it was partially her fault that I got into helicopters.
How did that go?
We were driving down the road in Vegas one day, and she just looked at me. She's like, I think you'd make a good helicopter pilot.
That's such a random thing to say.
That's what I said. And it's been something that's been rolling around in the back of my head for a long time. So I never said it out loud to her. So I was kind of surprised where it came from. It came from the fact that we'd watched San Andreas like 2 weeks previously. And, The Rock's a helicopter pilot in that movie. And it's the first and probably the last time anybody's ever compared me to The Rock and like, oh, if The Rock can do it, you can do
it. Yeah.
And so then, it took me a couple of years to actually get into it. And so I moved from Vegas up to Oregon, where I ended up going to flight school.
Did you have any experience with helicopters prior?
I had ridden on the Magnum PI helicopter in Hawaii when I was 16 years old.
And that kind of like was your like step.
Even way back when I was in high school, I wanted to be a pilot, although I thought more like fighter jets.
Yeah.
But I didn't really actually want to join the military, so that was never going to happen. And so I'd wanted to be a pilot forever, but finally decided to, I don't know, I guess you'd say like, give it a try, go for it.
So Shannon was like, you could be like The Rock and fly helicopters. And you're like, okay, let me give that a shot. So from that moment, how did you get to the school where you went?
So my sister works for the government, and I asked her once if she knew any like pilots, or well, that's true. I know she knows pilots. If she knew any civilian pilots, and she doesn't, but she did tell me that some of her military people that she knows, they will go and do some additional training now and then up in Oregon on the civilian side. And so she had kind of pointed me that way. It was actually one of the funniest things because I was like, really, you're telling me I should go to this flight school that's 45 minutes from our parents' house, like out of all the places.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went up there. I researched it. They seemed pretty, I don't know, legit from what I could tell, although I knew nothing about flight schools at the time, right? Like I just knew I wanted to fly helicopters. And then I went up and gave an intro flight a try.
So you drove to Oregon and then took your first intro, right?
Oh, no, other way around. We moved to Oregon.
Oh my God.
Because we were going to leave Vegas anyway. I'd lived there for 10 years. She hadn't been there for 7. And it was one of these like, do we want to stay in Vegas forever things? No. All right, we should leave. We wanted to go and give somewhere with like mountains and rivers and things like that a try anyway.
Yeah, get out of the desert.
Yeah, and that was also beyond the cage fighting. That was when I started getting into EMS. And there was a good ambulance company up in Portland. And I interviewed with them from Vegas. They gave me a job. And it was like, oh, I guess we're moving to Oregon. And then there happens to also be this flight school.
It's convenient.
Yeah. The original plan was I was going to finish paramedic school and then also do flight school at the same time. And well, anyway, paramedic school in Portland didn't want to transfer any of my classes from Vegas. So I just went to flight school.
Yeah. So you went full time to flight school.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. I wanna talk about like what your typical day looked like as a flight student there versus mine. But the first thing is, did you know how expensive it was going to be before you did it?
I mean, kind of, right? Like I went and priced it out and I was wrong.
Yeah.
So I had this idea in my head, like, oh, it's going to cost so and so amount. And it definitely cost more than I was thinking.
So you got your private, your commercial, your CFI, your instrument, and your instrument instructor.
Yep.
So all 5. How much did it cost you?
I've never been quite brave enough to total it up, but I think it was right about 95.
95,000. That's cheaper than me. I think mine was 117.
Yeah. I figured it cost like 75 was the number in my head, and I was definitely wrong.
So how did you pay for it?
It was kind of a mix. So even once I decided I wanted to do it, I spent about a year saving up money. You know, the nice things about like EMS, like on an ambulance or healthcare or whatnot, is unlimited overtime.
Nice.
So for 10 months, I worked almost every day, to the point where after 10 months, Shannon informed me that if I wanted to continue having a lovely fiance, I need to stop working 7 days a week.
Right.
But, you know, I saved up a bunch of money that way, and it was all gone in like 4 months. But
so wait, so you paid for like the first 4 months of flight training out of your savings?
Yeah, out of that. And then it was loans. You know, Shannon and I had some money in the bank, most were her than me, but I didn't want to blow it all on flight training. So loans, lots and lots of loans. Sally Mae and me are friends.
So that's what I have too. I just have loans out my eyes, and we'll talk about it later, but hopefully we can make that back, and hopefully the industry will pay us.
I'm hoping so.
So, okay. So you went to Hillsborough.
Yep.
What did a day in your life look like as a student? And you totally committed, right?
Oh yeah. 100%.
So you were a flight student.
Yep. So it took me right about 2 years to get through all 5 of my licenses, certifications. And I would work usually 4 or 5 days a week on the ambulance. We would do 13.5-hour shifts. And so I would work overnight ambulance calls. So at 3 a.m., if you called 911, I was the person that showed up at your house. I'd usually get off work, depending on the shift, between 5, 6, 7 a.m., go home, sleep until about 2 in the afternoon, and then I would roll into Hillsborough. And they required us to get there at least an hour ahead of time. There were more students than there were helicopters, even though there were a lot of helicopters. And they were first come, first serve. So if you wanted to make sure you got to fly that day, you showed up early, got your name on a list.
That sounds like an interesting system.
It was an interesting system.
Okay.
So I would usually show up at least an hour before my flight.
Yeah.
And sometimes more like 2 hours. That was also when I did my best job at studying, when I wasn't distracted at the house. And so I'd go there and stay there depending on, on the day, right? I mean, flying, ground, however the day worked out. And then roll from there to my next ambulance shift for like 2 straight years.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it was rough, but got done.
Yeah, no. So you got it done. So your private, how long was your private about?
I think it took me 7 or 8 months.
Okay.
There's a lot of weather delays in Oregon.
Due to what?
Fog.
Okay.
Rain.
Yeah. Like just the Pacific. What's it? Pacific Northwest?
Yep.
PNW.
I one time had I think it was 6 weeks I couldn't fly because it was just 6 straight weeks of like fog and rain.
Oh my God. That's brutal. Okay. So your private took you maybe 6, 7.
I think like 8 months.
Okay. So was it your day schedule? Was it like a flight and a ground every day?
That's what I tried to do. So I would book myself at school usually 5 days a week.
Did you book yourself?
Well, that's my instructor.
Yeah. Okay.
My instructor was amazing and is still a really good friend of mine to this day. And he was very flexible with my scheduling. You know, my schedule was pretty much all over the place, and he managed to squeeze me in as much as I wanted to. So I would book myself 4 or 5 days a week. And if it was a day that I could fly, I'd fly. And if it was a day that we couldn't fly, it was ground. You know, in Oregon, especially, 9 months out of the year where the weather isn't any good, it was like 50-50. Like
there's 9 months where the weather's not great.
Yeah, about 10 months, 9 months, 10 months.
Oh, that sounds like a terrible place to do a flight school. But I mean,
you get a lot of experience in the weather.
Yeah, I guess so. So a ground and a flight when you can make it happen. Yep. And about 8 months. So did you have one instructor for the entire duration of your private?
So I had the same instructor for my private, instrument, and commercial.
Okay, nice. So the way it worked at Mauna Loa where I went is we would have like one instructor for our private, hopefully if it worked, and they encouraged you to switch. Like if you did not get along with your flight instructor, switch. And I tell my students that too. It's kind of difficult at like a smaller flight school to like switch instructors because there's less instructors to go around. But if you don't get along with your instructor, you should switch. But we would do like one instructor per rating. So one instructor for private, commercial, but every 5 hours of flight time, we would switch. So a new instructor would get to like see how we worked. And we try to do that same thing at our place. We switch our students up.
We do.
So they can
One of the reasons why I was happy to get you around there too.
Yeah.
But it was only me. It made it really tough to switch things for people.
Yeah. And I mean, before I came, you were working like a madman, right? So how many flight hours would you say at Independent you're working now?
How many flight hours?
Yeah. Did you work like, I guess before I got there?
I think when you got there, I was around 1,300, like probably like 1,300 hours or so, something along those lines.
Nice. Over the course of how long?
Just a hair over a year. And when I started, because I moved out here, it was 2 years ago in January. Started, did my training, didn't have much to do, was just starting to get a few students, and then COVID lockdowns. So we closed up for, I think in Saratoga around like 6 weeks, maybe like 4 or 5, 6 weeks. So it's, a month and a half I didn't fly, period. And then we opened back up. The FAA released this really vague ruling that flight schools could consider themselves essential.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so I considered myself essential and I went back to work.
So back to the school thing real quick. What would you tell yourself? What do you wish you knew before you went to flight school and specifically Hillsborough?
So there's a couple things, and I try to pass along those let's say tips to my students that I have now. It's always the things I didn't know. What I honestly didn't grasp when I was a student, and this is probably private instrument most of the way through my commercial, was really like, what was I in for with flight school? Like I trusted my instructor implicitly to like guide me through and make sure I was doing the things I should be doing, like that he knew like the bigger picture, but I never had like a good grasp on what the bigger picture of flight school was. Probably partially because I was just so busy all the time. I didn't have time to sit back and really dwell on it. But so I try to do that. I try to really share with people, like, here's your bigger picture. Here's where you are progressing. Like, here's where you are now. Here's what we're trying to get you to be, things like that. And, the other thing I didn't have a good grasp on was you get a job. Like I was going on faith that I was going to spend $95,000, $100,000 and at the end be able to find a job. But I mean, it was stressful. Like at the end, even when I was doing my flight instructor and double I was just hoping that I was going to like somehow turn this into a job.
So, well, you makes me think of something. What was the order of getting your ratings?
So we didn't do it the same way as Mauna Loa. We talked about this once or twice. Private, instrument, commercial, then CFI and double I.
Interesting. Okay. So how I did it is I did private, commercial, and CFI at the same time, and IFR and double I at the same time. So there's pros and cons to both systems. So what was your journey like getting a job right out of school? And how many hours did you have when you finished school?
212 hours after my double I check ride.
It's pretty low, man.
And even at that, like I probably could have had it around 200. Yeah. Like I did some long line training. I did some training I didn't really necessarily need to do, but it was fun. So I had come across independent helicopters on social media. I think I'd seen, like, I think I'd found Heather through Whirly Girls. I love Whirly Girls.
And Heather's the owner of our company.
Heather's the owner of our company. Yeah. And so I'd seen her on like social media. And as I was nearing the end of my training, finally, I was starting to talk to Shannon about what we want to do from there. Like, do we want to stay in Oregon? She was never very happy in Oregon. She likes sun, and there's not very much of that in Oregon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it was like, hey, should I try and get a job with Hillsborough? I thought they would hire me. I think they would have. Or should we be looking somewhere else? I'm like, but if I sign up to be a flight instructor, like that's pretty much at least a 2-year gig.
Yeah.
And she absolutely was like, no, I don't want to stay in Oregon 2 more years. So then I started expanding my search, and it was like daily searching. Like I had like every day to see what was popping up. If nothing else, just to get an idea, like where are their jobs? Like, what do we want to do? And this job opens up here on an independent helicopter, and I'd seen Heather on social media, and she would do trainings for the FAA on like safe practices and like accident reports and things along those lines. And I figured someone who does safety training for the FAA can't possibly be a terrible person to work for.
Yeah.
Right. And she's going down to Heli Expo again in a month. I guess it's in a month. Right. And I'm sure she's going to be doing something again down there. So I sent off my resume to Independent after talking to Shannon, and they got back to me in a couple days. Then I did a couple FaceTime interviews pre-Zoom, and before Zoom was a thing.
Yeah.
And they offered me a job after like 2 weeks and a few FaceTime interviews, and I was still waiting to do my double I.
Nice.
So I was actually waiting on my double I check ride. So I accepted their job provisionally, or I guess once I finished my double I, and it was in like November, I think. And it took me 2 months to get my check ride in because weather, helicopter would break, whatever. It was just delay after delay after delay.
Were you hating that time period?
The whole time.
Like you felt so bad, probably.
I had I had my ambulance supervisors like notified, like, just so you know, if the stars ever align and like my DPE and the helicopter can show up at the same day, like I'm calling out sick that day.
Yeah.
So even like my ambulance supervisors, like, yeah, no, it's fine. That if that day ever happens, we're not going to hold it against you.
Okay, so you found the job at Independent. Was there any other schools that you were looking at?
So it wasn't so much any particular schools. It was more like areas of the country. I figured I would, if anything, find somewhere else that I don't know what I want to say, would be good for Shannon. Like, because, that was kind of like, she's followed me around a lot of places, and you and I have talked about this otherwise. Yeah. And I wanted to go somewhere that she would be happy. I didn't actually think New York would be that place.
Yeah.
And I just threw this out just because.
And upstate New York at that.
She's like, I'd love to go to New York. Really? All right. Whatever you say, dear. But so no, I was actually looking more like an area country where you're from. So like Colorado, even somewhere down like, Arizona, Phoenix. She's not a big fan of hot and humid, so it wasn't going to be Florida.
So not back to the desert.
No. And she didn't want to go back to Vegas either.
Yeah.
Like been there, didn't want to go back. I'd even talked about Southern California, except I didn't know if we'd be able to afford to live there on a flight instructor salary.
Right.
So anyway, just as things would pop up, she wanted to go to the Carolinas, so I would look for flight schools in like North or South Carolina. There really weren't much, but I was just keeping my eyes. This one popped up, and she seemed excited. I applied to exactly one flight school to be an instructor. So
wow,
I sent in my resume here, and I had a job here. Whatever it was, like 2 weeks later.
So my story was actually relatively similar. I was in my CFII training, but Independent, I sent in resume to. I sent a resume out to like 5 different places. I heard back from every single one. And I mean, like bare minimum, like, I guess having your CFII is a good thing and better than some of the industry, but in my eyes, I'd like the bare minimum. Like on my SFAR sign off, just the minimum hours, but I heard back from everyone. So if anyone out there is thinking about going on this journey and you want to be like a flight instructor, I think it's pretty hot right now.
Yeah, I think so. And that you actually just reminded me of that. One of the things I tell people now is so much of it depends on if you're willing to move. If you're willing to move, both of us obviously were. There are jobs. Like there are jobs out there if you're willing to go. If you want a job in the town you happen to live in, well, sometimes you have to wait.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being a flight instructor is you kind of just have to, I guess, suck it up. And if you're willing to move, you'll probably get a job. I mean, you have to be like a quality person and have no derogatory marks on your background, but you'll probably get a good job. And if you're a good flight instructor, and I kind of want to pivot to that point, what would you say makes a good flight instructor, and what would you tell yourself before being a flight instructor?
Something they told me at Hillsborough, and I think it's really panned out to be true, is just, don't worry about the hours you're getting. Don't worry about, all of those things, because they come as long as you like genuinely, I guess you'd say, like dedicate yourself to your students, care about what they're doing, do your best to help them along their journey, right? Because everybody's work is on the same sort of journey, right? It's hard, but we know more about it than them. And I think if you just give flight instructing your all the other things come with it, right? The hours come with it. I've definitely given my all to all of my students, and I try to. To this day, try to give everything to everyone. My phone's on silent, but I'm sure I've got 15 texts over there, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be the world's best pilot. You just need to be the best instructor you can be, and I think as long as someone does that, the rest of it just kind of works itself out.
Yeah, and and
keep yourself at R22 weight.
Yeah, keep yourself at a reasonable flight weight. If you care about your students, you show up every day, and I think if you have a good attitude, it makes
Mhm.
such a difference. My first flight instructor was very rude and very mean and did not want to be a flight instructor. And that really hurt me, not like just hurt my feelings, but it hurt my progression in flight
Mhm.
training. Having a bad flight instructor can really set you back and make you not want to continue. There's, I mean, you'll hear stories about people that started flight training and their instructor was an ass and they just were like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Think how much money people are spending, six figures to be commercial pilots. Like that's a lot of money to spend doing something that you're not having a good time at, you're hating.
Yeah. So you got two independent helicopters at 212 hours
I did
and now you're sitting where?
a little over 1,600 right now.
Okay, 1,600 hours. And how long has it been that you've been here?
Almost exactly 2 years.
Okay, so you gave about 1,400 hours of dual given in 2 years.
Yeah, I totaled it up the other day. I think it's more like 1,300 ish because I've done other things while I'm here too.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's been plenty of, well, not plenty of, but you've done commercial work. So with your limited experience in that commercial work, what have you done?
So we do lots of various things independent, right? So lots of just tours, especially upstate New York during leaf season. I take people up on tours. It feels like multiple times a week. I've also done the other fun ones, right? Tours down in New York City. We do aerial survey. So we'll take photographers out who we have a bunch of photographers that we take out who photograph job sites. So I've taken them out before. Power line stuff. I took the only real power line things I've done involve some guys who I think were taking pictures of the shrubbery around some power lines to see which things needed to be trimmed back. But nice, barely above ETL hover, crazy wind, frost patrol, which was an adventure.
Tell me that adventure.
Well, I don't know if you'll get the opportunity because it's not something Heather enjoys doing because it's probably super dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So first spring I was here, there was a cold snap, May-ish, something along those lines, May or June. And there were some farmers all over the place who had berry crops that were going to be destroyed by just these couple nights below freezing. So they hire us to take the helicopters out and like hover them over the top of their fields during the coldest part of the day, which is about 3 to 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And find with this thermometer in the helicopter. So we'll go and find the air above the helicopter or above the ground that's above freezing. And then we just use our downwash to blow it back down to the ground.
So there's like a temperature inversion.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they would be like running around on their field, like down, there was multiples of them with thermometers. So they would find like the cold part of their crop and have us go and like slow roll over the top of them.
Wow.
They told me afterwards that we saved the crops, but it was a difference between being like 2 degrees below freezing, like 3 degrees above freezing. And I guess that was the difference for their berry crops. It was 2 nights in a row from, an entire tank of fuel. So pretty close to 3 hours. Like there wasn't a lot of fuel left when we were coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the sun came up, the temperatures would climb and they didn't need us anymore. So it was just the coldest part of the night. But while you're doing that, there's no lights. So this place I was going to was the middle of a mountain in the middle of the night. I've got a Google Maps photo that shows power lines running to the farm, but you can't see them.
Oh my God.
And you're just like doing these like steep approaches to a black hole, and there's like a farmer with a flashlight, like waving you down, like I'm gonna die. Like this is it right here.
That like sounds terrible.
Yeah, so it's super dangerous. And actually, one of the nights I did it, someone crashed a helicopter doing the exact same thing, just up the river.
Wow.
So when I would do it though, because you also can't really see the edges of the field, I would go and do these like really awkward pedal turns because it was just kind of like back and forth all night. I guess all morning. And so I would do these really awkward pedal turns where I keep the tail over the field, no matter what direction the wind was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So it was lots of pedal work. It was just exhausting. And that was how the person crashed. He actually did some turn and his tail rotor hit a branch. And that was how he crashed a helicopter.
I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes.
And I was super paranoid about that the whole time. That was the actual image in my head of what terrible thing was going to happen.
Yeah. And how new into this job were you at that point?
I think I had like 500 hours.
Actually, that's like a fair amount of experience.
Yeah.
Still not great. So with that said, and do you regret not doing tours or right after flight school, going into flight instruction? Do you think it was the right path?
I think it was the right path for me. So, one of the other things I tell people, not everybody wants to be a flight instructor, and that's fine. Right? You don't have to be. I do think the route is a little bit more difficult if you're not a flight instructor, but that doesn't mean you can't go. The good thing about being a flight instructor, that if nothing else, even if you don't want to be an instructor, I've spent a couple of years doing auto rotations. I don't even know how many thousands of auto rotations I've done now, but for the rest of my career, if something were to happen, I feel pretty solid doing an auto rotation if I have to. And that's not something you get to practice if you go straight into tours.
That's
right?
a great point.
And so I'm not going to say like I'm as good on emergency procedures I'm ever going to get, because I'll be flying other helicopters and there's new things to learn. But when all's said and done, like I feel pretty solid on those things. And you flew with me the other day. Like, I feel like I can do an emergency procedure if I need to. And it's my years as a flight instructor that's given me the experience to go and like feel that confident.
It's so true. I mean, let's say you get just your commercial, your private and commercial. Technically, you do have everything you need to go work in the industry. And let's say by the grace of God, you go get a tour job and you build up 1,500 hours. That person who just did straight and level and takeoffs and landings versus a flight instructor who's done vortex ring state, settling with power, slopes, autos all day long, and had to teach people how to hover, who do you think is going to be more prepared and literally a better pilot? I'm not saying you can't be a bad pilot with just tour experience, but the experiences that you find yourself in as a flight instructor really challenge your abilities and push you to the limits.
They do. And that's just the skills side, right? There's also the knowledge side. Like I've spent a couple of years teaching people regulations, and not that I have every regulation memorized, because I certainly don't. But there's a much lower chance for those down the road jobs that I'm going to break some silly regulation because I just didn't know it existed.
Yeah, and like teaching aerodynamics by having to learn the aerodynamics to get your CFI rating, and then teaching them, I think you have a better understanding of the helicopter and what you can and can't do with it by having to teach. So as you have now accrued 1,600 hours, where do you see yourself? What's on your horizon, and where do you see yourself in 10 years?
It's hard to give an exact 10-year estimate. I have, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 jobs that are kind of on like my helicopter bucket list. And with luck, I'm going to be going off and giving one of those a whirl soon. But I would just like to be doing one of those, right? And so what I see myself doing is hopefully having some job that makes a little bit more money than being a flight instructor. But beyond that, actually finally having time to do things like go on vacations. I'd like the helicopter to be fun and exciting, because I purposely did not get a desk job.
Yeah.
But I'd also like to be able to live my life a little bit more than I have been as a flight instructor as well. And that's kind of what I would like. But otherwise, I don't know. If when the next one doesn't work out, wildland firefighting, I think I'd really like to do. I actually worked on hand crews way back when as a summer job as a wildland firefighter.
And what's a hand crew?
I was the guy that was out in the forest fighting fires with a shovel.
Nice.
Which is a fun job when you're your age.
Yeah.
But not really a forever. Well, I mean, some people do it forever, not very many people. And then when I worked on in EMS on the ambulance, I actually went and worked. I would take my ambulance out to wildfires and provide medical care to the guys doing the job I used to do. So, getting to come around someday and perhaps do that as the pilot, it almost feels like coming full circle. But that like I've always wanted to go off to Alaska as a helicopter pilot for a season.
Doing tours or something?
Probably not tours.
Okay.
I don't think I'm a tour pilot.
Yeah.
When I was off last week, when I took those few days off, I met a guy who had done exactly what you just mentioned. Just got his commercial, went off and became a tour pilot. And he was telling me about like the tours they do, including a 2-minute tour. They call it the up down. And you know what? I don't think I'm cut out for that.
Yeah.
Like, just up in the air, back down all day, every day. But in Alaska, they don't have as many roads. The interstate system isn't quite as impressive up there as down here, because it's huge and there's not as many people. So, they have towers on top of all the mountains up there, but they don't have roads to go to the towers. And so they use helicopters, right? You just go and you just like drop people off mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop, and then just kind of leapfrog around all day. Crazy pinnacle landings, some of the most gorgeous scenery you're ever going to see. It'd be fun to try for a season. I would be totally willing to go off to Antarctica for a year and give that a whirl.
One of the things that I've been thinking about doing, I haven't done any research into this, but I know that Africa has like kind of a lot of cool helicopter stuff.
They do.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I have this image in my head of like being in a helicopter and like circling a group of elephants with the sun setting and like a zebra in the background?
So that was actually my original plan, was what I wanted to do after
Really?
being a flight instructor. So I went to Egypt years ago just on vacation. Had a great time, and I've always wanted to get back to Africa. So previous to COVID, there used to be a lot of jobs like that because they don't really have the interstate system. And so they use helicopters to get around, like all sorts of things use helicopters. And a lot of those jobs over there were like 28 on, 28 off.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you work for 4 straight weeks, but then you get 4 straight weeks off.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a great point.
My sister, with her job for the government, used to have a similar sort of schedule, and she would every time she would get 3 weeks off. Every time she got 3 weeks off, she'd pick somewhere, like go off to Croatia on vacation, or just go, because you're already on the other side of the world. So why not? Like,
why not vacation?
It's a 4-hour flight.
So
and I was like, that sounds like something fun, but a lot of those jobs are harder right now with like COVID restrictions, like quarantines and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. And like the vaccine part, that's also an interesting concept to talk about, like the vaccines in the helicopter industry, but we won't get into it on this one. So how old are you?
43. Yeah,
you sure about that?
Not really. I try not to think about the number. 43.
So when people ask, is it too late to get started in helicopters? You had a pretty big career shift, not late in your career, but
yeah. I mean, I don't think so. You know, when I was thinking about it, and this is talking about it with Shannon as well, I figured I had, 25 good years of work left in me. And it was like, what do I want to spend 25 years doing? Like, what could I actually just do and be happy doing? And this is that thing for me. Like, I'm, now my first ever flight at the controls, my intro flight was in October of 2017. And I'm just as happy flying helicopters now as I was that first time. Like, I just don't foresee a time where I ever don't enjoy what I'm doing.
While you were instructing, was there any times where you didn't want to be in the helicopter? Or just in helicopters in general, is there any time where you weren't loving it?
For me, and this is also something I tell my commercial students and, the CFIs I've been training, it's when I do the same lesson over and over and over again. Like, it doesn't even matter so much what the lesson is, right? If I have to teach 5 people a day, how to hover in a row, that gets old. But if I'm doing, 5 flights in a row where I'm teaching anything, slopes, running, landings, I mean, any maneuver you can think of, that's where it starts getting a little wearing on me. So one of the nice things about doing it as long as I have is I have so many students now at various stages of their training. I can always kind of mix it up. Like, oh, I'm going to go do one flight and I'm going to go down and, talk to a tower. Then I'll go do off airports with somebody else. And all right, here's the person I need to teach how to hover. And, just being able to mix it all up like that makes it nice. The same thing, like, what these days have been like lately, like when you're doing just ground after ground after ground, sometimes that gets a little bit old.
It does. And I mean, even today I had 2 students back to back with the exact same lesson. And I get it. It's my job and I'm grateful that I have the knowledge to be able to teach it. But I mean, it's like being a school teacher, teaching the same lessons over and over and over again. So as you are a flight instructor, what is the scariest thing a student has ever done to you?
I think the scariest thing that ever happened to me, and it was the one that, you also think about when you're the flight instructor, was the student who felt the need to roll off the throttle entering the auto before lowering the collective. Just like 3, 2, 1, throttle.
Yeah.
You hear these stories about like the 1.6 seconds you have to get the collective down if, your engine fails on you. And having someone do that, that kick, and that you definitely feel that.
It's hard.
And then 2, you can't help but just see those RPMs going. Yeah, that was I've had that happen to me twice now, and both times, man, you get down. It's like, I need a few seconds. I feel happy to be alive right now. But hey, my reactions are there, so that's nice.
So give me the rundown of one of those. Try to give me a little, like, set up the story.
I was down with somebody else's student. In fact, both times there was somebody else's student.
Were they mine?
No.
Okay.
No, they were not. But both times were with somebody else's student, and it was someone who wasn't a brand new person, right? Someone who'd been flying for a while. Like, all right, I was just kind of filling in. Like, let's go, let's do an auto. Both times were at Orange County. And like, all right, setting up, 3, 2, 1, boom. And yeah, those RPMs, they drop really quick.
They drop so fast.
And, other than the fact that you have the, this moment of your life flashing in front of your eyes, then trying to be nice to that student. That's rough. Like, this student just tried to kill me and took a good shot at it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Let's try that again after you give me a second.
Yeah.
Let's go back, because that is not, in fact, the correct way to do this maneuver. So let's try this again, but with less almost dying.
So I've had students do the same thing to me. One of my students, we were practicing settling with power, vortex ring state. And so the recovery we teach at the school, vortex ring state is a state where the helicopter, you set it up at like 2,000 feet, pretty far off the ground. You slow down to 0 knots and you start descending vertically. And your rotor disc starts to circulate its own downwash, basically. And vortices are created around the disc, and then you can start to descend very rapidly. So you're descending vertically, and how we recover is we laterally slip to the right. So we apply right cyclic, we increase the collective and left pedal, and you slip yourself out of it laterally. And this way you don't lose a lot of altitude. Pretty normal maneuver. How I do it is I'll talk about it with the student on the ground, and then we'll go up, I'll demonstrate it a time or two, and then we'll be on the controls together. So I had done this with this student, and I think I had maybe like 100 hours of dual given at this point. So we get up there and I demonstrated it, then we did it together on the controls. And then I was like, okay, you try. I'm right there guarding the controls. And so 3, 2, 1, go ahead and recover. He starts slipping to the right. And I look over at my tack and it's starting to fall. And then the horn comes on. And I mean, I rolled on and recovered. And I was like, what happened? He's like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, set it up again, 2,000 feet, slow down. Start slide slipping to the right. And then I look over and my RPMs are just falling. Like, and then I set it up a third time and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch what he does. So I look over at him and like, as we're slipping to the right, his hand is rolling the throttle off. And it's like, okay, that's what's happening. Why are you doing that? And he's like, oh, I didn't know I was. And it's like, okay. So students.
Oh, yeah, that death grip on the throttle.
He was just nervous. So he was gripping the throttle and turning the engine off, which is, these are the things that you get good at as being an instructor, understanding your helicopter and hearing your helicopter, and something you might not get doing that.
But the good news is another way to escape from, vortex ring state or settling with power is if you have no power.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Just enter an auto rotation. So that was your scariest moment. During your entire tenure of flying, what is the closest you've come to thinking you were going to die in a helicopter?
Thinking I was going to die. I don't know if there's really been a time where I was like, this is going to be it. The 2 times where I had people roll off on me were those times where I'm like, I was a fraction of a second away from crashing a helicopter from, 1,600 feet up. The closest I felt like I've come to actually crashing a helicopter was in a quick stop. And I full on thought I was crashing a helicopter the whole way going down towards the ground.
What is a quick stop?
So it's a rapid deceleration. It's almost like the helicopter version of, I guess you'd say, like slamming on your brakes in a car.
Yeah.
We come aft cyclic and, use the other. I don't know how much you want me to get into the details.
That's good.
Okay. So this particular student, it was someone who had done many quick stops with me. So I wasn't really surprised, or wasn't really ready for the student to just completely come out of left field with this crazy quick stop. So student entered the quick stop, 3, 2, 1, came aft, but just like slammed in the right pedal to the point where the helicopter started just like pivoting to the right. Freaked out, slammed in the left pedal and yanked on the collective like it was an e-brake. Manifold pressure just goes like all way past the red line. And as soon as that happened, RPMs just start dropping fast.
Mm-hmm.
Low rotor horn, the horn comes on, and the helicopter, it's like we're nose up, spinning to the left, and it just like it's like it was dropped off a 4-story building. Like it just felt like you're plummeting at the ground. And I talked to Matt about this one right afterwards too. But my only thought was I was sure I was crashing, absolutely sure. So it was just get the helicopter level. So helicopters are designed to crash straight down. So so the skids at least break the impact so I don't die. And I did not even have time to think about like rolling on throttle. I don't think I would have done much, but I did slam the collective down while my student was freaking out and trying to yank it up. And so what ended up happening was got the helicopter level, and then it was dropping. And right before I got to the ground, the RPMs were able to spin back up. And the helicopter was like crashed down and just like hit the ground, like boom, just like went back up in the air, no problem. I had no idea what was underneath. Anything under the world could have been underneath the helicopter right then. And I just luckily put it down like between two lights on the edge of the runway. Like it was complete luck. I had no idea what was there. But yeah, it ended up there was nothing. But yeah, I remember doing it because of one way I was trying to not die. And on the other side of my brain, I was already thinking about how I was going to explain this to Heather.
Hey, I crashed your helicopter.
Yeah.
That would be a tough phone call to make.
Mhm.
The toughest phone call I've had to make was just landing a helicopter in a field due to weather. It's like you call the boss, it's like, hey, the weather's not good, I landed. And it's like, well, did you check the weather? Yeah, I checked the weather. It's not good. So, all right. So you said hopefully maybe soon you'll be moving on to a different job. What do you think? I won't ask you to share your numbers right now, but it's commonly known that helicopter flight instructors don't get paid well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're a commercial pilot, you're a flight instructor, you're a CFII. It's like you've got all of the ratings and you get paid not well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'll make enough money in this career?
I think so. So much of it goes down to like, I guess, how much money you want. I just want to be comfortable, right? If I wanted to be a pilot and make money, I'd be a fixed wing pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Fixed wing airline pilots make a lot more money than helicopters do. Helicopters are significantly more difficult to fly. It's kind of irksome, but yeah, like I'm sure that down the road it's going to be around that 6-figure mark, about as low as you can get 6 figures, right? But at least enough that I'm going to be comfortable. That's all I really care about. Like I want to not have to worry about money.
Yeah. Is that even? Can you ever not worry about money?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. When you're bringing
I'd like to think so.
When you're bringing in $185,000 a year, and it's like I just need a bit more. It's always this chase.
Like I just need one more motorcycle, a fancy one.
Yeah. So and that's the part that does irk me. All of my fixed wing friends. I'm not a fixed wing pilot, just a helicopter pilot. Same for you, right?
Yep.
And I have flown a plane before. This sounds bad, but I don't think it is as difficult to fly a plane as it is to fly a helicopter. I think there's a lot more going on in the helicopter, and to not be compensated the same bothers me. I think because it's just so much. It's not a meritocracy, we are so much more skilled,
yeah,
and we don't get compensated the same. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't really think it's the most fair thing in the world, but I think the big difference, and because what they get paid for is the responsibility of all their passengers, right? If you've got a couple hundred people on board your airplane, even though you don't have to do much, I think it's the stress of that. That's what you get paid for. Plus, they have unions,
yeah,
collective bargaining agreements, things like that.
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
We don't have as helicopter pilots. So many of of the big airlines, they have deals with certain flight schools where you go and you get your fixed wing certifications there, and then you go and instruct for them. And then when you hit a certain number of hours, they move you on to be like second in command or first officer on a regional jet, spend some time there. You just kind of get put into the pipeline. Your first few years as a fixed wing pilot, you don't make any money either.
Mm-hmm.
But the top end is significantly higher for them than it just is. I mean, there's a few lucky people who will make a lot of money flying helicopters, but it's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
You stick your time out fixed wing and just move up the pipeline and you eventually get there. We have to plan that out all on our own, which I kind of obsessively plan out like career moves anyway. Like, oh, I want to go from here to here to here to here to here. But when I look at like those jobs I might be interested in down the road, especially if the next job turns into not a forever job for me, although at least if it happens, I've been pretty happy with them so far. But it's like, oh well, I was as a flight instructor, I made sure I hit pretty much all of my ATP minimums. Like it was just kind of just in case down the road I want to do it. And that ended up being something that they were really thrilled with. I think it's actually one of the things that so far at least have made them like me. But then it's like, all right, so I've got that checked off, but maybe I want to go do wildland firefighting, but I don't really have like the long line experience. So then it's like, where do I go to get the experience for that job? And you end up having to do this, this weird little helicopter pilot, like bounce from job to job to job thing to finally get the experience to do the one you want. And that's all on you. Like it's how much of a sense of adventure you have and how much you're willing to go and do the things.
Well, and that's a great point. With the helicopter versus airplane thing, they maybe at the top end of their career, they make great money, but also we get to have a lot of fun. We get to do long lining and offshore oil rigs and firefighting and EMS, I think we have a capability of really, and we get to be home more. Well, I mean, we're moving around probably more, but we get to be home more. What did your family say when you decided you wanted to be a helicopter pilot?
Oh, well, to this day, my mom, actually to this day, the only person from my family's ever even flown with me is my sister. My mom was sure I was going to die. I'm sure she still is sure I'm going to die.
So, yeah, same.
Yeah. But that's all right. As Shannon told me once, I've had a good run. It's fine. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. It's better. It's better than the boring life I would have had otherwise.
Yeah. So was your family overall accepting?
I think my family was accepting that this is what I was going to do, whether or not they accepted it. And now that I've been doing it for a while, they're much more accepting of it. There's no pilots in my family. There's nobody who's ever done anything like this in my family. And so it's a scary thing for people in my family. And now that I've been doing it for a while, I'm able to demonstrate that I guess it isn't as scary as it probably was, or as they thought it was. They're much more accepting. But even that, they're probably sure I'm going to die on just about a daily basis.
Do you think flying helicopters is dangerous?
Yes and no. I don't think that it's inherently dangerous. It's more dangerous probably than some other things, but it's so much of how you approach it. If you approach it as safety first, then I think you are already kind of ahead of the game compared to a lot of other people. And that doesn't mean that you refuse to do anything that's not perfectly safe. Like let's say I think of it oftentimes like my time on the ambulance, where you're going on to 911 calls, walking into houses, you have no idea what's going on there. Like, it's an inherently dangerous thing. There are times where I walked into houses and I'm like, I'm gonna get shot here today. Like, this is the day I get shot. And so it's kind of take something that's dangerous and go about it as safely as possible. That's kind of how I feel like helicopters are. Like, you do what you can to cut down as many of the risks to offset those things, and then do it as safely as possible. But like, our MD500 friend who's pulling power lines, there was nothing remotely safe about having a power line attached to the bottom of a helicopter and stringing it from pole to pole
and flying sideways.
Yeah, it's flying sideways while you're doing it. And he thinks our job's crazier than his.
Yeah, no, he actually said that.
Yeah, he said it to me.
What you guys do is more dangerous.
And so, it's not the safest profession, but I also don't think it's nearly as dangerous as most people think it is.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's safer now than I do before I was getting started. I guess the general public's perception of helicopters is far different than it actually is. And I guess that goes with every part of or any job you do. But now that I'm an instructor, I know the regulations, I'm comfortable with them. I know the aerodynamics, I'm comfortable with them. And I know the helicopter, and I'm also comfortable with that. The real problem is me, it's and every accident you read, like, I don't know, probably more than 80% of them are all pilot error.
Yeah.
The danger is not flying helicopters. The danger is myself. And how do you mitigate that? We've got checklists and personal morals and ethics and rules to follow and personal minimums, but it's pretty much me and you that's the danger.
Like, every night, in fact, we're almost past my bedtime right now. Like, I make sure I get a good night's sleep every night. And there's never been a time in my life where I stayed up all night most of my life. Like, getting sleep, I don't know what that was. But now I totally make sure, because if something happens, it happens quick in a helicopter. And that doesn't mean you can't deal with it. I think almost anything is survivable in a helicopter, let alone like not getting injured. As long as you're engaged with what you're doing. It really reminds me of when I first started learning to ride my motorcycle. It's inherently more dangerous in some ways than a car. But if you let your attention lapse, is when it's really things start getting dangerous. And helicopters the same way. Like, you just have to keep focused, and you can't be 100% vigilant 100% of the time. But that's a skill you need to develop. Yeah, and just being tired, like, it's harder to focus.
Yeah, being tired, being under the weather, hungover, sick, it really does affect your attention span so quickly. And that's the thing about a helicopter is, like, your engine fails, you have a second and a half. I mean, I guess we quote that. I don't know the actual time. I've never tested it. I know it's pretty quick.
Let me tell you, watching those RPMs.
Yeah.
When someone just throttle chops you, it doesn't feel like much longer than that.
Well, and even if you get the collective full down, they'll still fall. I know that I've done everything by getting the collective down, and they'll come back up, but well, I hope.
Both times it's worked for me.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're just behind the ball for a second, or one of the things I really teach my students, we have this I'm safe checklist. It's the FAA thing, but like, your emotions too. If you
Mhm.
just broke up with your girlfriend or your dog died or your mother died, you will not, I don't think you can respond as quickly.
Yeah.
And that's your life on the line.
I was actually working at Independent Helicopters the day my grandfather passed away,
Mm.
and I had a full book of perfect day of flying, full book of flights. I don't even remember. I think I was probably planning on doing it was more one of the longer days of the year, probably like 6 flights of auto rotations or something. And I was not mentally capable of doing that sort of thing. I ended up canceling some of the newer students who I just didn't think that I personally had the attention span to deal with. Like it wasn't like I'm going to go teach somebody who doesn't know what the controls do sort of day. And I did do 1 or 2 flights, but I'm sorry. I guess we're doing ground today. Like didn't tell them why.
Yeah.
Feeling a little under the weather. Not going to go flying. We can do ground if you want to.
Yeah.
Right. But it is what it is. Right. It's you. You have to stay focused.
Yeah.
Like you just do.
You got to be in the moment. And one of the final things, you mentioned this, but like being a flight instructor, um, versus like the tour gig, we're talking about these two routes, but looking at those ATP minimums and like your part 135 minimums, if you just go be a tour pilot, maybe you'll build up hours pretty quick, but we do it pretty quick as flight instructors. We also get lots of cross country time and experience at new airports, and off airports and maneuvers. I mean, and like nighttime hours. You think about like how many boxes we can check with our students. Like we're obviously not using them, but we do benefit from what they need. I think you can get a lot more done as a flight instructor for your career than not.
Yeah. I don't think that everybody needs to do it. And not everybody does as long as I have, I guess. Not everybody's on it for like a 2-year gig. I always figured it was 2 years minimum. Like that was just kind of what I, filed away in my head. And even at that, like can't quite make myself get completely out of the game if I get another job. So I'm still gonna be hanging around. But being able to check off those 100 nighttime hours, being able to check off the cross country hours, being able to check off the instrument hours, like just having a simulator around that I can use when I want to.
Yeah.
Let alone the cross country, the total hours, the PIC hours,
Night cross country.
the night cross country hours.
Like, yeah, you get, even if you're a tour pilot, you can't, I don't think you can get night cross country.
No. I mean, I think it's going to be super few and far between. Maybe you get to ferry a helicopter and then let you do it at night.
Yeah.
Because they want them to have it for the daytime so they can do tours.
Could do that once a week as a flight instructor.
Yeah. But I have checked off virtually every, I guess, box that I could check off as a flight instructor.
Yeah.
And, when I've been out, interviewing with people, I mean, that's what, they look at my hours, and it's not the total hours, because a lot of the jobs I've been applying to, I barely hit their minimums.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to skip the tour pilot job.
Yeah.
Right. So I am right at their minimums, but then they've been liking me because it's not just the minimum hours, it's all the other hours. It's the nighttime hours, the cross country hours. And it's been good for me having that.
And it also feels cool to have CF double I behind your name.
It does.
Feels great. All right, Nick. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Good luck with all of your future endeavors. And I'm sure we will get an update on how your job prospects look. But you enjoyed your time as a flight instructor?
Yeah. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Honestly, I wouldn't, and I'm glad I ended up where I did. Like Independent Helicopters was the best possible place for me to go.
Yeah, I concur. And do you have any regrets about your journey to become a helicopter pilot?
No. Sometimes like I could have taken a little bit longer and had a little bit more fun, but Shannon, I could have taken a few more vacations maybe, but that's about it. Like really, I'm always like an all or nothing sort of person anyway, so I was never gonna take the slow route.
And it's done pretty good for you
so far.
Yeah.
Hopefully it keeps doing all right for me.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, Nick.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Take care.